Hello everybody, welcome to another tutorial. This will be part 1 of the Victorian interior. I know I'm a little late. I said I was going to have this one out by the week after, but this one's a big one. And after I made the last tutorial, the basewood one that apparently a lot of you liked, I kept adding more and more to this material, this texture. So yeah, scope creep is real even on materials, but I'm really happy with the way it turned out. But this is going to be a big one, so they're just gonna give you guys a warning. It's going to be a big video. It's a beefy one. I'm going to try and go super fast. I'm not going to like read out numbers as much as I normally do. Sometimes I forget and I just read up a bunch of numbers. When I forget that you guys can just pause the video and look at the numbers and then continue. So I'm going to try and go as short as possible, and I should probably stop talking, but just since this is a big one, I want to give you some things to some of the things that are new that I did in this tutorial that we haven't done in the previous one. So let me show you what we're going to be building. We're going to be using a grayscale switch, which is going to work similar to the grayscale switch, but I think this one's called like a what is it called? Hold on. Let's go in here and find one of these. Multi-switch. So you can have like more than 2 options. Normally we just use the grayscale switch, but we'll be using a multi-switch and we'll have 3 options this time. Let me just pull my picture back. So we have the window option, the wall option, and the door. And as a scope creep option, you can see here we have a drop down, so you can choose whatever you want. I'm going to leave it on door right now because it's pretty large and I don't want it to compute again. Oh, I shouldn't have done that. But if we're going to have like an open door switch here that we can use. And then once that's enabled, we'll be able to use our door opening amount slider here. And as I slide this, the door is going to open. So you can like leave it at a specific amount. This was very cool. We do delve a little bit into some math, which is not my strongest suit. But for this, luckily I was able to figure out after like a couple hours. So yeah, very cool. Kind of like a Resident Evil loading screen door opening, which I thought was pretty cool. Probably not very useful as a texture, but if you were doing like a side scroller game, I guess that could be useful there. But anyways, let me look at my list here. What else do we look at? Something to just notice here. Oh, did I close it? Whoops. There we go. We have some details to pay attention to. We have like seams basically with the wood planks. Something very important for me in this material was having the wood grains run in the correct direction. So they usually run the long way. So if we like zoom in over here, we have the wood grain running this way, this one going this way. And I wanted to have like a distinction or a seam to kind of show that. So that was a very important detail. And I wanted to break up the grain. So for example, from here to here, it's not the same grain running left to right. I broke it up here because it's kind of like a separate part of the I don't know what this is called, the molding, I guess, for the bottom. So this is kind of like on a different separate run from here. Same with the wainscoting or like the paneling. We have the grains going this way and they stop at this intersection, this diagonal line, and then it goes vertically. So we have horizontal wood grains and vertically, and getting this corner mask is something that I struggled with in this tutorial or in the making of this material, but I figured out and I wanted to share with you guys because it's super useful because in the material, the mask is, there's an inside and an outside. So it's just like this is separate. So getting that diagonal cut was super important and fun to come up with. We do some simple rain, nothing crazy. And we have other toggles in our material. So if we go back, we can turn the rain on and off. We can turn our wallpaper on and off. If you turn that off, that should go away. Okay, it's making me. Okay, no, it's not. Okay, it's not making me look bad. So yeah, so you can turn it off if you want. And I will probably, you can change the color in here, but I think I was going to make a like a color slider, so you can change the color of the wallpaper or the background, but that's not a big deal. We'll do that in the color tutorial. Um, we do use curves a lot. The curve node that we did use in another previous tutorial. I don't remember which one off the top, but you know, this is how we do the crown molding, shaping. So if we get real close, so if we look at this from the side, I think this is for the door, but same idea. We use curves for this stuff too, but you can see there's like a lot of detail here, so we get more control with the curve node. So we're able to do these designs here, and we'll be using the curve. Typically, you know, when you see people do tutorials with curve nodes, they just kind of show you this, and for me it was very frustrating because then like I wouldn't get the same result, but you still get the idea. So for this, I'm going to click on every single one of these so you guys see the value. So there's like a Y and an X value. So I'll click through these. I'm not going to read them out, but I will click them. I will click through them quickly, and I will let you know. I try to not use too many different ones, so some of them are like copy paste, but yeah, I'll show you all that information very quickly so that you guys can have a similar result. And then last thing, I do use a utility node called floodfill get outputs. This was made by my friend. Normally I don't like to use utility nodes because not everyone's able to get them for whatever reason, but this one is free, and my friend gave me permission to show you guys. So my friend is Stan Brown. Just pull this over here. Great guy. He works at NVIDIA. Materials for them. I will put his link, or the link for his ArtStation in the description. But also, if you go to store down here and then go to XP tutorial custom nodes, here you can see that it is free, and you get 3 nodes. Obviously, the one we use is just the flood fill, but you don't really need it if you kind of know what it's doing. So let me just close this. Basically, what it does is it gives you a random color output, which we can do all these manually, but it just kind of saves you space and it makes everything look nicer, and it gives you all the different outputs. And I have done these 2 outputs in a previous tutorial. I'll try and find which one, and I'll try and put it in the description as well. But if I get enough comments saying how do you do this manually, then I might make a separate video just doing that by itself. And it's got a couple options here that you can play with to get better results if you need. But anyways, enough yapping. I think it's time to get into it. Yep, I think that was all I wanted to talk about before we get started. Okay, so yeah, this is the entire graph. It is a lot, but like this big chunk right here, I should stop doing that. It's very repetitive, and this is for normal, base color, and roughness. So not to worry about in height, but yeah, let's get right into it with the height, and let's get started. So I'm going to pause the video, and I'm going to unplug everything, and then we'll run from beginning to end. All right, be right back. All right, we are back. Now just to, before we get started, I just kind of want to show you guys what my references were like, just to kind of give you an idea, to get you guys into the habit of gathering references before getting started. It's very important. Something I still need to work on. Sometimes I like to just get in there and then I don't know what I'm doing, and it really slows you down, and then you realize you have to go get some. So I mainly took after this reference I found online on Google, where I find most of my references. And this is where I decided, oh, I can make a room just out of textures, right? I have my wall, like right here on the left. I assume this is like a door here, your window, your floor, which we'll be doing a floor too. You know, we'll be doing a ceiling as well later on. I didn't do like a tri-window setup, but yeah, this was my main reference here. And then I had a bunch of different ones. Some of these are AI, I think. I'm pretty sure those are AI. But it was just more about like color and just like shape idea. Some ceiling examples there. Some wainscoting, some like wooden paneling ideas. Like what are their shapes like? Does this go inside or outside, or does this just sit above it? You can see here where the seams would be, where this wood grain is running left to right. Just some more examples here. Resident Evil example. And in here I had some profiles for my rail and my bottom rail and baseboard, stuff like that. And then just like a basic base wood here. Banana for scale. But and then a door, and then like some shapes and detailing. I was going to do a doorknob, but that doesn't really work with the texture. It would have to be a separate piece, especially for the knob. So I didn't really end up really using this one that much. But anyways, yes, get into the habit. Pause the video here if you want to have this reference or where I zoomed in. But all right, so I've gone ahead and I've disabled all the height. I've disabled the color, the normals, and metallic and roughness, and we're just working with height. Just to get started here, we are going to be working, before I forget, with a height scale of 7.5 for the height scale, and then I'm using a tessellation of 6. 4 should be enough for you, but if you want more, you can go 6 or 8. Just for the sake of this, I'm going to go with 6 because I'm also recording and whatnot. And to get started, just real quick, we're just going to start with a shape and a levels, just to lower that initial white to 0.5. Now from here, run this level. We'll be back to that in just a second, but just to kind of help you guys set up your outputs here, have that levels feed into a neutral level. This is just a place like a default levels. And then from this guy, have it go down into a height to normal world units. You can see the settings there. And then you can use HBAO or RTAO for your ambient occlusion. And you can see the settings that I used there. And then feed those into your ambient occlusion, your normal, and your height. Don't worry about this in the middle stuff. Just get yourself set up, and I'll explain when we get to there. All the steps are labeled H for height and then a number. That way, mid-video you're able to know what I'm looking at a little easier. There are some stuff below some of these that we will do later on, like this guy here. This guy right here is done at the end, and I showed myself that by this yellow border here. It kind of tells me that I can't really do this until I get some of these portals or some of this information. So we can't really do this at the very beginning. Okay, so yeah, so we start with a shape, we lower it, and then we blend it into an add linear dodge. And what we're going to be adding is another shape, and then I use here a transform 2D, and I lower it by -0.65. And then I scan it all the way up, because every time you move something or stretch something, you get a little bit of a grayscale value here in the edges, which you can change your filtering to nearest, or you can scan it. So like you can change this to nearest, and it'll do that. But sometimes I just do a scan. Either way works. Sorry. And just one thing to notice, or to pay attention to the 2D transform settings. And by that I mean pay attention to this filtering, because sometimes I change it and sometimes I don't. So just aside from looking at the matrix and stuff, also look at the filtering. Just give it a quick glance. All right, so after we scan, we're going to be making our first portal here. We're going to be calling it mask _ paneling. And then after that, we have another levels here. And basically, we're just lowering because we're working on the bottom shape. So let's actually, I should have turned this on. So this is going to be like the wainscoting or the wooden paneling for the lower half. And then I'm going to leave this disabled, but you can add your blend, so you have like the space for it, and just disable it by pressing Shift D. And then, our add linear dodge, and then we start having that there. Now for the next one, we cut out the hole for our window, our door. So we're going to create a shape here. This is the shape for the window. You can see the settings there. And now we're going to drop in a multi-switch grayscale. And just to show you real quick, multi-switch grayscale. We are going to the lower slider, the input selection. We're going to click this drop down and we're going to expose as a new graph input. And then we're going to call this guy. Let me just pull up the one I made. So this is what you should make yours look like. So identifier, type of wall. Label is what's seen, so I call it type of wall. And then I did a drop down list here. You can change that. And then I did 1, 2, 3, wall, window, door. So whenever you make a new multi-switch grayscale, change this drop down and you'll have the option here and change it to type of wall. And then when it's blue, it's because it's a parameter that you've made already. So all you have to do is just change the input number from 2, the default, to 3. And then this is 1, 2, and 3, which corresponds to 1, 2, and 3. So this is very useful because we're gonna have different inputs, and those inputs are going to be specific to these types of walls. So you have your wall, your window, your door. So I have this set to 3, and then I have it set to type of wall. So then you know that the top one is wall, the middle one is window, and the bottom one is door. So because the middle one is window, and this is the window shape, I have window running straight into the window slot. And then for the door shape, I take this initial shape, I do a transform 2D, I change my filtering to nearest, and then I take the initial shape, the window shape, and the lowered window shape, and I add them together to make my door shape. I wanted my door to kind of be at the same height as the top of the window. And then the middle one is window, so the window shape runs into the window. This is now the door shape, so then this runs into the door input. And then the wall is already done here, so I don't need to cut a hole for it because this is what the wall input is going to look like. So for that, I have I guess we should make this first. But basically what this is, if we follow this back, I have a uniform color and my output format is changed to 16-bit. And to change it, because this should be grayed out for you, I think by default it's set to relative to parent, but change it to absolute and then change it to 16 bits per channel. And then call that portal black, mask black. And then make this grayscale and set it to 0. So whenever there's an input that is empty, so for that example, our wall, then we're gonna plug that into it because that means it's nothing there. So if you double click here, it's black, window shape, door shape. And then when you double click outside in the space here, and then you go to preview, you should be able to see this type of wall in the drop down. And then for right now, we're working with window, but we'll be switching back and forth just to see the different inputs. All right, so then that goes into a subtract because we're cutting a hole into the wall. And then next we go to H3. So now this is where we add our first trim. So if we look here, turn it off and turn it on. So now that we have our hole, if we don't have our hole, then it's going to look like this. So that's why we have our hole there. Now here, oh, sorry, I forgot to mention this guy. So once we have our multi-switch, create a portal and call it mask wall, window, door. And that reminds you of like your inputs. So the first input is wall, the second is window, and the third is door. Now we're going to reuse that same portal right over here. You can probably just drag across if you'd like, or make a portal. And then we're going to use a bevel here, bevel node, and then our first curve, our first boss fight. So we're going to click in here. And basically I'm going to click on this first guy. And usually these they end with a 5 or a 0. So in this case it's 0.575. but it rounds up to 0.58. So if you see something like that, then you should know that I work with fives for some reason. My brain is just faulty. So that should be 0.575, but it shows us 0.58. I wish there was a way to change it what it shows, but so it's the y is 0.58, and then our x is 0. And then the next one, again, this is 0.57.5. But I think if you write 0.57, you know, it's gonna be close enough. But just I don't want to have to keep clicking here and taking up more time to show you guys, because it even rounds it weirdly. But and it just changed it to 0.58. But yes, it's very sensitive, so I don't want to like click in too much. But you can see the value. So I'm just gonna click through these quickly to save time, or we'll be here till next year. And then it drops off, and that drop off is obviously shown here. All right. Then from that bevel, we do a histogram scan. Then after this curve, we do a multiply, and we multiply the initial mask wall window door portal. And then we do a multi-switch grayscale and plug that multi-switch grayscale to the top. Again, change your input selection to type of wall, otherwise it's not going to link up, and you're going to be wondering why it doesn't work when you change the drop down here. We use our mask black portal, feed that into our wall, and then for door, we're using the mask black. For window, because we're already working with window, then it's going to pull from up here, from the top. And that'll give you this. Now, for the next part, here I try to add the, there's a difference in elevation. Now this is just like extra flavoring, right? Because I don't want everything to be kind of sitting perfectly flat. So I wanted there to be some height difference between the wooden moldings, I guess, that are like, you know, intersecting. So to add that detail is almost like probably too much work, but what we're going to do is we're going to pull from this multiply blend into a histogram scan, and this basically gives us a mask of the range of the curve. So if you see here, the curve falls off here, so about half of this is not being used, which corresponds to whenever you use a curve node, you need a grayscale. So the reason why this knows to start here and end there is because of the range. So this is where like the top of the bevel is, right here, and then this is the end. So your curve node is going to work between this corner and that corner. Now, because within the curve node, it ends about halfway. If you notice, memorize this pixel right here, and then we look at the bevel. This is not used because it's not used in here. So the bevel is your entire playground, and then the curve is where you decide how much of that playground you want to use. So we only use half of it, and that's why if you compare, it ends like about there, or right there. So just keep that in mind. Where were we? We were right here, right? Yeah, so then that's why this mask is being done from basically from this mask, or this height mask, and not from here, because otherwise it wouldn't match up, and it needs to match up. So we do a histogram scan, and then we make another portal. We call it mask window outer frame. And let's stop right there for a second and come back over here. After this scan, it's going to split into an extend shape grayscale. And I think this is a new node we haven't used yet. And what it does is it extends the shape in a certain direction. I just learned of this node while working on this material, which is super helpful. What I used to do is just a 2D transform and stretching it. But, you know, this felt very messy and very hacky. And then I noticed there was a node just for that. So basically, you just have to worry about the distance, sometimes the position, and then like the angle. And then you have some other settings. You do have a show helper here, which helps show you basically what it's doing. Make sure you turn it off. Otherwise, what you see is actually what the output will be. So make sure you turn that off. And there's some other settings that you can play with. So you can see here that I just extended the distance to 2 because I want to take this. I want to run this to the ends. So we get that. And then I have another one going the other direction. Once I have all these 3 outputs here, we're going to use a subtract blend here. And we're going to subtract this shape from this. And what we're trying to do here is, let me show you the end result here, is to get this. Because this is what's going to help us get, like I mentioned in the beginning of the tutorial, how to get this mask here. So that's what we're doing right now. So what I'm doing is I'm isolating the top bar from the sidebar. So because it starts here and it ends there, and I'm trying to just cut across. So I extend the shape, and then I'm left with that. And then I take the other extended shape, and then I'm going to subtract it. So I'm going to subtract this from this, and because we already subtracted this initially, we're left with just the corners. Now, once we have the corners, so we have, top left, top right, bottom right, corners. Now, the solution to getting those horizontals is to use a flood fill, and you probably know where I'm going with this. I'm going to use a flood fill gradient, and then I'm going to rotate the angle to 135. So that means we get a gradient from one corner to the other corner. Ding, ding, ding. We use a histogram scan to cut it in half. Set it to 0.5 because we're cutting half of it. And this is a perfect gradient from 0 to 1 from one corner to the other. And we use this angle to change it to that corner. So it flows from bottom left to top right. Because that's where I want my seam to go. I want it to go this way and not this way. Otherwise, that wouldn't make sense. Once I have one corner that I want, I use a mirror grayscale you can see the difference here. So because they're all pointing in the same direction. So then this one mirrors it this way. Then I mirror it again for the bottom. So I'm focused on this top left guy, and then I mirror this top left to the top right, and then I mirror the top to the bottom. And then we're left with this. Now, this is useful because it gives us this, but I need my middle bar back because I need to get this entire piece from here to here. So then I take this extended shape, runs all the way out here, and I add it, and then I'm left with this. So then my bar is in here, but I need to get rid of this stuff now. So then we're going to take this guy, this extended shape, and then we subtract that, which gets rid of the middle. So now we have the bottom of that wood bar that we want. And then lastly, we take that mask wall window door mask that we made, and we multiply it. Because that is everything within this is where we're at. So I use this outside here to get rid of that. And then we're left with our bars. Perfectly white. There's no grayscale in there anywhere. And it's diagonal and it's perfect. Let me just fix one thing that's really bothering me. There's an extra gap in between these nodes. Needs to snap perfectly. Okay, there we go. Phew. Video saved. All right. So then we have our horizontal bars, and then we're gonna take these bars, and we're gonna take this mask here, and then we're gonna subtract the bars from that mask to get this. And at this point, there's different ways to add and subtract masks and multiply masks to get what you want. So there's probably like an easier way, but this is how I end up getting to it. And then we subtract this guy from this guy, and then it gives us our sidebars with the diagonal corners. So now we're going to make 2 more portals, and you can see the names that we have our window outer frame X because it's the ones running side to side. And then we have Y because they run vertically. Now I take both of those and I do a copy of 0.6. See, so now they're at different elevations. And then I use that and I invert it because I want to use a min darken. Yep, min darken. Now you can do there's different blend modes, but for this one I wanted to try out min darken for this kind of detail where there's different elevations for the boards, or these wooden pieces. So then that's why there's like they're not like perfectly at the same height. But if I turn this off, okay, JK. Wait, where aren't they? Oh, it's because one's completely. Oh, right, because they're not. I would have to add them, right? If I change this to add, and then make this 100, then they would be at the same elevation. But I'm gonna undo that and turn that back on. And then there it is. All right. Let's move on along. We're already, how long are we in? 30 minutes in. Holy. Okay. It's going to be a long video. So then we're up to H5. I start here with a shape. I go all the way out. I do a 2D transform. Then a bevel. I'm going to start going a little faster here. Now for this curve, I think I just flipped. Did I just flip this one? No, it's a little different. So I'm just going to click through these real quick. Oh, something else to pay attention to in these curve nodes. Sorry, I didn't mention this. Is look at these. Every time I click on one of these, I use a different type of curve. I don't know what these are called. Whether they're rounded, whether they're like 90-degree angles. Yeah, just play around with these. Plop a couple random ones and then play around with these, and then you'll see the difference. But yeah, just pay attention because these will switch based on what I click on. Yeah, I think that's it for that one. All right. So then just real quick, we'll do 2 histogram scans. This one is 1 and 0, and this one is 0.455 and 1. And basically, I'm trying to break up this curve into a top to bottom, like a full range scan. And then this one is just the middle piece. So you can see here. Because I don't want the same wood grain running across all 3 of these. I want, the lower ones to be like basically run one way, and then, this one run the other way. Hopefully that makes sense to you guys. And then for this levels, I just lowered it a little bit. And then you can see the outputs for these guys. And then we're going to do a multiply, and we're going to multiply our window shape, our wall window door shape with this, so that it limits it to the bounds of the window to get rid of the excess. Otherwise, this is going to go, well, technically, I guess it won't, because this height is higher than this height, so it's already above it, so it won't show, but you should have this anyways. And then that feeds into a max lighten of 5. I'm not sure if I showed what these are. So this is a min darken. I think I did show that one. This is a max lighten. And this is a subtract. Sorry if I didn't show these, and it's an add linear dodge. And then we go on here. This is going to be a max lighten, and we're going to H06. And then here we start with the window outer frame portal, which looks like this. We invert it. And then we multiply with our mask wall window door. And then we do again an extend shape. And then we bevel that extended shape. Wait, what is this? Let me just zoom out real quick. Oh, is this the inside here? Yeah, okay, so we're doing the inside framing there. All right, so we extend, and then we do a bevel, and then we do a curve. And this is a very simple one. So let's get the profile here. Let's get on the side. So you can see here that it goes straight, and then like a perfect like bevel, and then down. So if you look over here at the curve, it goes straight, bevel, and then down. And the reason why there's like a bit of a fall off here is because if I have this completely straight, then the fall off here, you can see the difference there over in the distance. I accidentally paused it. I didn't realize I paused the recording. So I went back and I looked where I left off. So I was explaining why there is a bit of a curve here. And that's just to kind of have a more gentle fall off. So for example, if we look over here and I take this one and I kind of make it like this. Actually, you won't. Wait, do you? You can kind of tell here if you increase the like the factor thingy, the resolution, you can see it better. But it just gives you like a more gentle fall off, and it gives you a less artifacty, like straight drop, like you can see right here. And you can just soften the decrease, which sometimes I will do, but in this case, because there's going to be other things layering on top, it didn't really matter. All right, so I don't think I should, but just in case I didn't. So you can see the values here. And this top curve is the same curve down here, except this lower one is at a lower elevation. So you can see it's just slightly slower, and the reason for that is if I take these and I increase them, it's for that. Because if I go above where this one is, then it's obviously it's going to sit on top. So for these guys, it's like just copy paste and then just change the elevation. So this is that, and that, and then make the two portals because we'll be using these later on, and then do a max lighten here, and then I do a histogram range to kind of play around with their elevations a little bit. So I go with those settings, and then in order to get rid of the in-between to keep the black, I use a histogram scan and I max it out to get the mask for these guys, and then I multiply here to get rid of the, because when you use your range and you play around with the position, you affect the entire thing. So then you have to mask out what you don't want. And then we make another portal called window inner frames, and then that's going to plug into the middle, which is window. It's wall, window, door, WWD. And then because these like frames only apply to the window and not to the door or the wall, then we use our mask black, which is just our grayscale black, for the input of 1 and 3 for window and wall. And then we do a max lighten here. And I don't know if I showed some of these. So this is a max lighten. This is a min darken, max lighten, subtract, add linear dodge. I don't know if I showed those, but just in case. All right, so that's 6. Should we do this now? We do need these later. So yeah, it's okay. So let's take a pause there from 06 and let's go down below to the basement. And we are going to be using that mask we just made, the XC. C stands for curve. Okay, so we're going to take this guy and we're going to scan it. And then we're going to take our wall, window, door mask and multiply it just so that we can get the frames within the window mask. And then we're going to subtract our window outer frame, which is this guy. And that's going to, you know, cut it to where we need it. So it's subtracting. So it's just shortening it. And then I do it again because I take our window inner frame YC, which is the opposite of this guy. Looks like this. We histogram scan it. And then we subtract. Then we add. So we're going to take our XC and our YC, our window inner frames, and then we're going to divide. I rarely use divide, so sometimes I just play around with blending those until I get what I want, and I swap them to see what I get until I get what I want. And then I invert the result, and then I histogram scan it. And actually, this mask that we're coming out with, I think, is for the for color. Yeah, it's for color, but we're gonna do it now just because it's part of it's with the height stuff. So basically, what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to get the color for just this right here. Because right now, I had masks for for both of these kind of together. It was either all the way across or all the way across this way. But this gives me the mask, which is like where the seams are. So then I do a histogram scan after the invert grayscale. And then here I multiply with this guy. And then that leaves me with just that little guy there, which would be this guy right here. Let me get my snipping tool out. Yeah, so this shape that you see right here is this. Because before we had either this or this. But now, with this divide and this, this stuff right here, we're able to just get this. Oh, should probably go red. Which is going to be useful for when we're trying to mask out our color. All right. So then here after the subtract here, we will do an add because now we're adding this little bit to this, and this is supposed to stop. This is this right here. So then we add this little piece, and then we get this. And then that will become our window inner frame X. And then we're going to take the result from just now, and we're going to plug that into the foreground of this blend and subtract. And then that gives us this. So then it gives us the mask for this. So we take this guy, and like I said, we subtract. And then what is this? Okay, so then we multiply out the wall window door, and then it gets masked out to just where the window would be. Then here we subtract, and we're subtracting the window outer frame. We're subtracting this guy, and then it gives us this. So then we have this guy and this guy, which is perfect fit. So now we have these two for the next tutorial, for the base color. Actually, I think the next one's going to be normals. So we have a special episode or tutorial there. Okay, so now let's continue on. So now we head to H7. So what's going on here? Okay, yeah, so this one added these guys, and now we're adding, what are we adding here actually? Oh, these guys. All right, so let's do that. Start with a shape. Transform 2D, I move it to the left. And then I mirror it to the right. And then I bevel it very, very, very slightly. And then I use a curve node again. And you can see here what that looks like in the 3D. So it's got a bit of a curve. And then I flat, and then another curve. So it's like a rounded bevel. So you can see that it's like right there. So for these values, we start with this guy, 0, 0, this guy, and then just flatten that out. Then we take a histogram range to kind of play around with the values. Otherwise, it's going to be all the way down there. Same process. We take a histogram scan of the curve. And it's important to do this step here because if we do a histogram scan of the bevel, it might look different. So if I copy paste this guy, these two might look different. And the reason why they don't look different is because my curve uses the beginning and the end. But if this guy like ended here, then these two would look different. Okay, well they should. Oh, sorry, it's supposed to be like this. Okay, never mind. It's making me look like a fool. Where you should. Oh, never mind. It's because it's on the inside. You know what? Scrap all that. Let me undo that. I should stick to the script. Okay, so then we're going to take that histogram scan in that range and multiply. And then window small frames Y will be our next portal. And then that's going to feed into a max lighten. And then for that, we're going to take a new shape because that gives us the ones going vertically, and now we need the horizontal ones. So I'm going to start with another shape, another transform 2D, a mirror grayscale, another transform 2D to move it into place, into a histogram scan, into a bevel, into another curve. And I think this is the same copy pasted curve as it is here, but just in case, boom, boom, boom. And then same process, histogram range and a scan, multiply. And now we have height window small frames X because they're going horizontal. Then we max lighten them. And I think there is a bit of a discrepancy in the height because I wanted to have, again, show that little like seam. Otherwise, they'd be perfectly flat and it would look like it's one piece of wood going this way. And you would need a big piece of wood to do something like that, to carve that out. And then we need our multi-switch grayscale again. Don't forget to switch your drop down here to type of wall or whatever you ended up naming it. And then add the input number change it from 2 to 3. We need the black mask to go into here. And then here we're just plugging in height door frame. Oh, okay. So we got to make this. So yeah, so you guys don't have this yet. So actually, oh, I should have done this in the very beginning. Okay. So for now, leave that blank and plug this into the blend here for a max lighten. And let's go ahead and do the door frame. Because otherwise you guys don't have a door frame. So which one was it? Over here. Okay, so let's go over here and start. First off, we're going to start with our wall window door mask. We're going to create a bevel for it. And then we're going to use a curve node. So you can see here what we're doing the molding for the door frame. Oh, that's a lot of points. Okay, so let's just get into it. Boom, 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 bing, bong, bong, bang, 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 bang. And again, pay attention to the curve types. And you can do your own pattern if you'd like. And then we're going to do a histogram range again, similar process with a scan into a multiply. And then we're going to do the same thing down here, except we're going to take our wall window door mask and extend it. And then we're going to bevel that. Now the reason why we're doing the extend shape and the bevel, similar reason as I explained before. I don't want to have it, I'm trying to get rid of this guy right here, this bevel or this gradient. I need this to go straight like this. I need this gradient to run all the way to the bottom. So that's what I have here. And then I think the curve here is the same. Yeah, so you can copy paste this guy and paste it over here. And then similar process. Should have probably done this so that it looks just as nice. Like that. The curves are together and then these guys are together. So then we're going to multiply, the histogram range and the scan. And then we're going to multiply with our wall window door mask so that we're left with this. Now let's go down here. Now we're going to take this bevel and we're going to histogram scan it to 0.001 because I want to get the very, very, very top part. I want to get this corner and the inside. I want to get rid of the outside. So then once I scan that out with 0.001 in the position, feed that into a subtract, and then we're subtracting this result from our typical mask. And then we get this. We get the inside hollowed out. I take this scan and I extend it. And then I use that to subtract to get this. And there's probably a different way I could have done this, but this is the way I ended up wrapping around in my head. So if you find a better way to do this to get the same result, then by all means. We take this scan and we extend it going this way, left to right. And then that's going to be part of the subtraction for this guy. Again, to give us the corner pieces. You can kind of see where we're going with this. Flood fill. Flood fill to gradient. 135. Auto levels. We cut out half of it. And then we mirror. Now I only did one mirror in this case, not two like before. We're going to take this result up here and split off at the bottom and then feed that over here where we're going to subtract these guys from this guy and then we're going to get this. Now the reason why I'm not getting this on the top and the bottom is because this door frame runs straight all the way to the bottom here. So I don't need like my diagonal cut here. Oh, that's why I didn't mirror the bottom, because I'm only using the top and the bottom here. Now, something that I did differently here to save some nodes. If you look at this blend mode, I have my cropping area at my bottom set to 0.5. By default, this would be set to 1, and it would give me this. But 0.5 is the middle of it, so it's kind of like a mask, like an opacity. It's like using the opacity mask, basically, but it's kind of like built in. So you can save yourself some mask, like if you have to build the mask, and you can just use, rarely I use this, but it's at the 0.5. And you can see what it's doing there. So 0.5, and then we get that. So if yours is looking different, look at the cropping area. I might have different settings there. Sorry if I don't remember to mention it. And then here, we just have to multiply out the door frame, because I was having an issue here where my frame was running longer than it should, and it took me a little bit to figure out what was going on. But then I just needed this multiplication here, and then the result of this will give me my mask door frame Y. So make sure you make that portal and name it the same way so you can use it. And then I think we should already have this guy where we add this extended shape and these corners. And again, we're only really worried about the top frame here. So we get this, and here we take this result and we subtract these two guys, and you can see here that I changed the bottom cropping area again. Otherwise I would have this, and I want this where I'm only subtracting the top half of, because I'm using the 0.5 cropping. So then I have, I take this and I feed this into the background of this blend. And then I take this guy for the foreground and I copy. But then I take this as the mask, as the opacity input. Because without it, I would have, I guess I don't need it. But we're going to stick to the script. So then I have this and this. So basically I have this mask, but I have the bottom removed, basically is what we're trying to do here. And removed this way and not this way, because I want to keep this. And I just have to build the rest of the legs here for the frame. So then that gives me height door frame. And then I scan it. Wait, what is this? Oh, okay. No, okay. I thought these had the same name, so I was getting confused. So then once I scan it, I make another portal called mask door frame. And then I take the door frame Y, which was made down here. And then I have this. And then I call this mask door frame X. So then I have my Y and my X. And I have been forgetting to change my preview from window to door to kind of show you what's going on. So if you've done everything right, you should be able to change this type of wall to door, and then you'll see your masks change. So I think when this was set to, because this is all for the door stuff, so none of this is for window. So I was using window, and that's why my mask looks a little different, because my window extent is only up to here. So if we change this to door, then we get what I wanted. And all of this is basically just for the door. For doors. This is all door stuff. None of this is for the window. Yeah, so now this is making... I was wondering why, this... Because I knew this was for the door, but I forgot to change the thing to door. So I was working with the window stuff, so it's kind of hard to tell what I was trying to do. But you can see here, if you're following along, just look back here, and you can see what I did to... Why I have like two of these setups. And how I was able to fix the issue where the door frame runs all the way to the bottom. And we get rid of this guy here. But you guys should be able to look back and like just follow through and figure out what I was doing. So let's stick with the door for now, since we're doing door stuff. And then let's take this guy. I think we needed this guy a little bit ago, right? No, it was a different guy. It was this guy. Right, so now we should have this mask, the height door frame. We should have that available now. And then when we make this multi-switch, yeah, that is what's going to plug into the door input here, input 3, into the max lighten. Then we have here our actual door. So again, yeah, so let's leave it at door, because door goes with door. So now we're going to take our height from 07 and scan that so that we isolate the black with the scan. And then we call this mask opacity. Now this is more for window. So if I change this to window, you can see that it gives me like the glass panes. So now I'm going to use this later on, because when I render this out, I want a light to come through. So I had to have an opacity mask for marmoset. So now let's go back to door. Yeah, so sometimes you'll wonder why some of these are the way they are, and it's because they are for different, wall types. So then we invert, and then we call that one mask glass. So we'll have two. We'll have one for what is glass and what isn't glass. So this is everything but glass, and then this is just glass. Anyways, from 07, we're going to branch off into 2 levels. And the first level looks like this. And then that is going to be the number 1 and number 2 slots of a multi-switch grayscale here. And then for this levels, it's just a slight change in the level out low. And then we're going to do a multiply of 0.05 with height door planks. Now, I don't think you have this yet, because that is down here. So just add the blend, but disconnect it, Shift D it, and then we'll come back to it in a second. For opacity input here, we're going to use our mask glass portal, and this will only apply to door. Well, it'll apply to whatever this result is. And basically what this is doing is saying that because these levels, when I was working with these levels, I was only looking at the bounds of the inner door. So like from this corner to that corner to this corner to that corner. But because when you play with the levels, it affects everything around it. So like the wall, the frame, the side paneling. Then I needed to use this mask to tell it to only use what's inside the door frame. And that's why none of this other stuff is affecting the outside. Otherwise, it would look a little different. Yeah, see, you can see all this change happening in the material if I don't have this. But now when I have this, and then I turn this on and off, it's only affecting what's inside because of that mask. And then this should be turned off because we haven't done this yet. We'll get to it after we do this guy up here. So now we're going to do that guy up there, and we're doing H9. And that's just going to be like the door detailing there. We're going to start with a shape, a bevel into this curve, which I think is a repeat. Repeat of which one? Not that. Not that. I think it's a repeat of... Not that guy. Not that guy. Wait, where are you? Is it this guy? Or maybe this is the first time I use it. Oh, no. Okay, I know what I did. No, this is a copy, but the original is later down. So we're going to actually copy the copy to make the original later. Yeah, because I like rearranged some stuff here. Alright, so for this guy... Yeah, it was this guy, right? 09. Yeah, we're working with 09. Okay, sorry about that. So then here are the values for those. Don't forget to look at the curve type. And then keep this one, flat. And then the bottom one here is a copy paste, luckily. So after this curve, we're going to do a safe transform grayscale. And we'll be just offsetting it a little bit to the left. And then we're mirroring it to the right. And then that's going to feed into the foreground here and into an add linear dodge. Now let's do the bottom. So take a shape into, I think it's the same bevel. Yeah, it's the same bevel. Because now we're just making the smaller shape down here. So it should be a lot of the same settings. Copy paste the curve. From up here, another safe transform, but we're going lower. We're mirroring the other side. Now here we're adding both of them. Then we're auto leveling to get the full range, and we're calling that height door detail. And then we're using a levels here to lower that detail because we're going to be subtracting. Yeah, subtracting. Because otherwise, if I increase this all the way up, then we're going to be cutting all the way in, and we don't want that. So then we're going to take that, and since this is only for doors, this is a door detail, then this is going to go into the door input, and then input 1 and 2 for wall and window is going to be the black mask. And then that's going to go into the foreground here. Now let's do this fun right here. Buckle in, because then we got this fun down here. But I think then from there, it's kind of pretty much starting to go to the downhill. All right. So for this scan, we're going to be taking the top curve first. So we're working top to bottom. So top layer will be this top, and then bottom will be, yeah. So this is basically a copy paste of the top. But yeah, this bottom is this bottom, and this top is that top, because we're working with the bottom detail and the top detail. So again, we're going to take this guy here into a scan, and then we're taking also the same guy there for another scan. And this scan is 0.4, and this one is 1. Because there's a height difference, then playing around with the slider will isolate the area that you want. I think there's another node for that. I think it's a histogram something. But anyways, so now we have these two, and we're going to subtract this guy from this guy, which gives us basically the inner. This inner black square is now this mask. So then we are going to go from the blend into an extend. And then we're going to take this top scan and branch off to do a subtract to get this. And then we're going to take this mask here and extend it up and down, and then use that to subtract to get this. So the extend shape grayscale is very useful for this kind of stuff. And then we isolate the corners so you know what's coming. A flood fill to gradient, 135 degrees, into a scan, into a mirror, into a mirror, because we're going to be using the left and the bottom corners. Once we have that, we are going to subtract this scan, subtracting this from it, which gives us this. So now we're starting to get our diagonal wooden line going this way. And then up here, we're doing similar thing, but we're taking this extend and we're subtracting, or we're adding that from that, and we're getting this. So now we have these two. So we're going to take this result and we're going to multiply with this, and that'll give us this. And then we're going to take this guy and subtract this extend shape, the vertical one, and then we're going to be left with this. So now, as you can tell, we have this and this. But this is only for one of these, and we have two of them, and they're offset. So now we're going to do that. So now we're going to offset it to where it's originally supposed to be, which I think you can just copy paste this one right here. So copy paste this guy and paste them over here, because these values need to match. Otherwise, your masks are going to be off. And then we mirror it to the left, and then we do the same thing here. We take the save transform right here, and then we do the same one, and then we mirror it to the right side, and then we take these two and then make these two blends, but we're going to have to do some, we need to go down here for the rest. So now copy paste, it looks pretty much identical. So yeah, copy paste all of this down here, and then just change the inputs to this bottom curve. And I'll just run through these numbers anyways, just in case you don't want to copy paste. So then we have 2 scans into this blend here, into this extend shape, and I assume you guys can read, follow along where it's coming from, and I'll try and show you that. Into a subtract, into another subtract, and then we have an extend shape down here to go, up and down. Flood fill gradient, 135 degrees, into the scan, into a mirror, into another mirror. And then, these, if you're copy pasting, they should be the same. So then you have your add linear dodge and your subtract, and then you multiply up here and you subtract down here, and then you use the same transform 2D that you used right here. So 324, 324, negative 324, negative 324. And then you mirror for the right side. And now you're going to take the top from this guy and the top from this guy and add them together. Should be an add, right? Yeah, add, because now you're getting this detail, this detail, this detail, and this detail. And then you're going to take the vertical ones and the vertical ones from up here, and then you're adding those together, and then you're getting these guys. And then you have your mask door details, X and Y, and this guy and this guy. And again, this is going to be mostly for coloring. Alrighty. Yeah. So now that we have this big chunk done, let's go to H10. So now we're adding our lower molding there. We're going to start with a shape, a transform 2D into a scan, and you could probably just change this to nearest instead of doing another scan, but it's cheap. And then we're going to call that our mask crown floor. And then we're going to bevel that. Something to pay attention to In this transform 2D, I changed my tiling mode to no tiling. Because I think if I don't have that, what happens? Yeah, it doesn't work. Yeah, because otherwise it would, yeah, because then if you don't turn the no tiling on, then this whole square will be black, and then you can't really bevel that. So yeah, sometimes I will change this to no tiling. If something is off, look at your tiling, look at my tiling mode. But I should call that out because obviously any of these nodes could have it. All right, so then we do a bevel, and then we do a curve. So let me click on these. So then we have our 0, 0, and then this guy slightly off the wall there by 0.01. And then you see these values. Oops, that moved. And if we look at the curve type, then we do our range here, and then we take our crown floor mask and multiply, which is this is a different way of doing what I was doing before with the histogram range and scan. So we multiply that out to get rid of this gray there. And then we need to mask out whether it's a wall, a window, or a door. So if it's a door, it needs to cut the middle because it needs to make room for the door. Otherwise, it's going to look like that. So I'm just going to trip over that and possibly die. And if it's a window, it'll look different. Well, actually, no, if it's a window, it'll be straight. But anyways. So then once we do that, subtract here. We're going to subtract from the foreground there and do a max lighten. And then from the curve, we're going to do a scan. And we're scanning out the lower portion of the molding down here. So I ended up masking out from like here to the bottom. And again, it's because I don't want the same wood grain to run across both of these, because technically I think this would be 2 separate wood pieces. You have this guy and then this guy. I think I showed these numbers, but just in case, I don't remember in my short brain or short memory. I think I did, but just in case. No, I think, yeah, no, I definitely did that twice. Whoops. All right, so then we max lighten that, and then we got the floor molding there, and I think now we're doing the middle one. Now for this guy, we are going to start with our mask paneling, which is this guy, which we made at the very, very beginning. It's like one of the first ones we made. Yeah, this guy. And then I bevel. And then we have this guy, this curve here. This one's 0, 0. Then we have this guy. And then that should be 0 and 1. Same thing, histogram range into a scan. We multiply it out with the mask down there. And then we're actually going to create a mask from this. You can call that crown paneling. So that'll be, you know, from here to here, the mask. We multiply. Then here we have a subtract. We subtract out the wall, window, door mask, because we need to make room for the door. Otherwise, it would look like that. So then, the only time we don't need to subtract anything from it is from the wall. So I guess technically I don't need this. I don't think I need this. Okay, maybe I do. No, wait, no, I do, because there's going to be 2 results. That's right, yeah. All right, sorry. So the result from this is going to go, oh yeah, so then we have this subtract, right? Yeah. And then from this, the result of this is going to go into 2 and 3. Window and door. Okay, because I need this for both of those. Now where I don't need this for is for just the wall, because it's going to run across. So that's going to go into input 1. And then, you know, from this grayscale switch, multi-switch is gonna go into the foreground into a max lighten. All right, I need a drink. 1 second. Alrighty, so now we are going to summon our crown floor 01, which we should have. Yeah, which we made just back here in H10. And then we're going to mirror it to the top because now we're going to work on our top one here. So let's actually turn this on. We're going to turn that guy on. So it's just, since this was the floor, this is the ceiling one. So I just mirror it. Wait, why do I have two of them? Oh, I think I know why. I think it's only seen in the window. Is that why? Or maybe it's seen in the wall? Why do I have this? I don't know. We're not going to question it now. We're just going to do what it says. We have this mirror. And then this mirror. And maybe we'll see why later. I think I kind of know. I think it's because I do end up having like another, like a accent here with window. Actually, let's go back to window. Because I think window has like, a lot of this stuff is just for window only. So when we have these two mirrors, and then we're going to take the crown floor again here and subtract to get rid of the bottom one, because now we're just working with the top. Into a histogram scan, and then we're going to call this one the crown ceiling. So we have the crown floor and crown ceiling. So then we have a bevel, and then we curve it, and that gives us this detail here. So let's go with 0.47 and 0, 4.47 and 0.75. That, bing, bong, bong. And then we get this curve. Then we range it, and then I multiply out this guy to again just mask it off. And you know, you could do the scan and etc. etc. All right, and then that feeds into the foreground and to a max lighten. So then we get that, and then we have our height, crown ceiling. I use height in the beginning when there's like grayscale value, and then I use mask when it's just black and white most of the time. Okay, so then what are we doing here? So now we have H13. Let's show that, and that gives us our side for the windows. Okay, cool. So we get that. So start with a shape, and we're going to call this shape window crown size, and then we're going to bevel it, and then we're going to mask out the center by subtracting the wall window door mask, and then we're going to get rid of the bottom by subtracting the mask paneling from it. So you can see how we're cutting away. Boom, 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 boom. And then here we are subtracting the top. So we're using the crown ceiling, which we just made. Or not that one, yeah, right here. Subtracting to get rid of the top. And then here we get rid of this middle stuff. So we're going to call our wall window door mask extended. I could use the extend grayscale node, but I didn't use that for this one. And then I inverted it to get the top and the bottom. And then I used that to subtract. And then I create my curve. I think I accidentally moved that one. Oops, there you go. And then again, just create a scan out of that, multiply it out, and then call this the mask window sides. And then that's going to feed into input number 2 for the multi-switch grayscale, which is window, and then the black mask for wall and door. And then that's going to feed into the foreground. Because these side bars here are only for the window. Is there anything down here? Nope. Perfect. So now we go to H14. What is this? Okay, so this is that middle accent. So yeah, this guy right here. So this middle accent is only for wherever there's a window, I think. So we're going to take our window crown size and our crown ceiling masks and multiply, because I want to get just this middle here. So that's how I get that mask. And then I take a trapezoid transform grayscale, which basically what it allows us to do is, let me just show you real quick. I think I've used this once before in another tutorial. But let's take a basic shape and just reduce it, or not the tiling, sorry, the scale to 0.5. And then we're going to use the trapezoid thing. Actually, we'll just do like that. And then you can stretch the top, or top stretch. And then obviously you can change this to no tiling to get rid of that. And then you can play around with the bottom. So this is good for, like, obviously trapezoids. So then once we have that, wait, where did I leave off? Here. Yeah, so then that's how I get like this diagonal edge to it. Because I wanted to start from like here and then go that way. So it starts there and then it goes out. So then we add this to that to get this. And then here I use a directional blur, which I don't really use often, but I wanted to have a bevel just on the sides. So I use a directional blur. And then I have here a levels. And then I take that levels and this directional blur and I screen them. And then I take this directional blur and then I scan it all the way up. And then I take this result from the blur and the levels. And then that goes into the window slot. And then our black mask for the wall and door inputs. And then from this scan, we create the crown ceiling accent. So that gives us just the isolated middle piece, which we'll need again, because I don't want the wood grain to run across perfectly across all of these. So I have this guy here so that it runs among this two, but then there's a different offset for the middle guy there. And then we use a screen of 0.3 for that. Then we take this wall window door transform 2D stretch and we drag out from it into the top of this subtract blend. And let's turn this on real quick. So we're just adding this little piece here. And we're going to start with this shape. And then we're going to subtract, what we just did here with that into a subtraction. And we're going to use our mask paneling portal there. And we're going to subtract to get rid of the bottom one here. So now we just have the top one there. Then we're going to take this shape, this transform 2D, this histogram scan, and then we're going to subtract. And we're going to get this little bar here. That bar is going to get beveled into a simple curve. So let me just click this, click that, and click this one. Then we're going to histogram range it. I'm not sure why I arranged it. Whatever, we're not going to question it now. And that's going to fit into a multiply. And we're going to take this mask. And that's going to go into the foreground. And we're going to multiply. And again, some of these things don't make really much sense, because some of these things apply to like the door or the window or just the door. And then we're going to take that and call that height trim top. And that's going to fit into the window slot. And then the black mask for the wall and the door, and feed that into the foreground into a max lighten. Now from this bevel here, we're going to pull out into a histogram scan. Let's turn this guy on, because now we're making like another detail on top of that bar that we just made. So we're going to take from that bevel into a histogram scan, into a transform 2D, into a bevel, into an auto levels, into another curve, and this is just to kind of give us that half rounded top. So we got this one at 0.55, I think, and 90, or it's maybe 0.5625, and then we're going to multiply with this so that it gets cut into that, and then we range it. Then we scan the result of this, and then we multiply it. Then we call the result of this the height trim top accent, and then that feeds into the window slot, and then the black mask into the 1 and 3, the wall and door. And then we have our max lightens, and then we have that guy. And then we do 17, which is this guy. And this guy needs to be turned off for now, because I don't think we can do this guy just yet. Or we will right after. Okay, so then this is max lighten. So let's go to the beginning. We're going to start with our window crown size portal that we made back over here. Back 2 years ago, over here. I should just click on here so you guys can see the result. So look for the mask that looks like this. And then we have our wall window door, our most used mask. And then we are going to subtract to get that. And again, we're just subtracting masks at this point. So we're going to subtract the mask paneling. Then we're going to subtract the window sides. Then we're going to subtract the crown ceiling. And then we're going to subtract this guy, which comes from this guy, which is the initial, this piece here. So now we subtract a bunch of detail, and what we're left with is this perfect box within the bounds. So again, I use a directional blur. Directional blur is a way to kind of bevel a specific direction, so you can change the angle. So I basically want to smooth out the left and the right side of this, and not the top and the bottom. So I use a directional blur at 0, so it's only blurring from left to right. So then I scan that, and then I call that my mask paneling top. So then that basically gives me this mask. And then I level it by a very small amount. And then I screen it so that I get, because right now the directional blur is going from the top to the bottom, but with this screen I limit it to just the top, or to here and here, rather than going all the way to the bottom. Once I have that result, yeah, you can kind of see there's a bit of a grayscale or drop off right here. So then we take that and we use another levels here, and then you can make this blend and to multiply by 0.04, and then just disable it for now. We'll get to it in just a couple seconds. And then that's going to feed into the input number 2, the window input, and then our black mask for our wall and door, our 1 and 3, and then plug that into the top here for the max lighten. So now for this portal that we need to make, we're going to go right down below, and we're going to start with our crown middle. I forgot what the S stands for. 01, which is basically this mask. Actually, we can't have that mask yet because it starts here. Okay, put a pin on that. Let's go over here and make this shape. Now this shape is called mask crown middle south. I think it stands for solid 01. So now this guy. Oh, wait a second. Did I use? No, okay, yeah, this goes all the way. Yeah, this is why we're waiting until the end for this guy, because this needs something from all the way over here, and we couldn't get to it yet. But once you make this guy, let's pause. Make this guy, and then let's go back over here. So this is like right below H17. So we're going to take that guy that we just made. We're going to extend it top to bottom. And then we're going to use that guy to subtract from the mask paneling top from this guy. And we're going to get the sides. and then we're going to call the result of this paneling top, but Y, because it's giving us the sides there. And then we're going to take mask paneling top and subtract to give us the inner box. And then we're going to take our crown middle S01, so this guy, and we're going to subtract. Now, I don't know why I'm doing this, but we're just going to leave it. And then we're going to copy by 0.75, and we're going to have like this two-tone here. So we have different elevations for the sides and the middle piece. And then we're going to etch detect it. And then we're going to use that utility from Stan Brown, plug that into the mask. And then we're going to take the random grayscale, so the second output, and plug that into the middle here. Wait, actually, I think I know what I was trying to do here. But it's alright, we're just going to leave it. And then once we have that, we're going to multiply with paneling top with this guy to isolate, to get rid of all this other stuff here that we don't need. And then we're going to call that mask paneling top planks. Now this guy is our golden ticket for this guy. And I call it planks because it's kind of like the broken up pieces. And again, it's just to kind of give us some elevation variance in our wood planks, because they're not all going to be sitting perfectly flush, and it adds a nice detail, especially when we add the like our highlights in the color and our normal maps. It adds a very nice difference in detail. So then this should already be plugged in. The planks goes into the input number 2, and then input 1 and 3 take the black mask into H17. All right, so now let's pick up here where we were, and we are going to, I think we should already have this done, but just in case, here's the shape again. We're going to bevel that shape. And we're going to do another curve here. So let me give you this. That's at 0, 0. We got that. We got that. This guy. That guy. Her. Him. There. Boom. Bang. And then bing. Then we do a range and a histogram scan. And we multiply. And we're going to call this guy crown middle E for empty because it's hollowed out. Maybe it should have been H. Then we're going to take this guy and we are going to transform to D and move it up to the top by that much. And then we have this transform to D by that much. So then we have one at the top and one at the bottom, and then we add them together. And then we have this min darken here. And we're going to take our crown middle HV. When did I make this? Okay, I don't think we can use, we don't have this yet. So we'll make this in a second. So just disable this guy for now. And then feed this guy, this blend, into input 2. And then the black mask for input 1 and 3. Actually, I should turn this on too, so that we can see what we're doing. Now we need this guy. But we can't do that guy until we do this guy. And we can't do this guy until we do this guy. So let's go up here. So then after H18, we have this shape here. And then we're going to create a portal called paneling shape O. I think O is for original. Listen, don't make fun of my names, okay? And then from there, we're going to go down here into a bevel, into a curve. And I think we've done this curve already, but you can go copy paste it, but just in case. And then we histogram scan that. And then we extend the shape. And we get this. And then we're going to take the paneling shape O. And that's going to go into this subtract here. And what we're going to subtract is take the scan and extend the shape left to right. And that's going to subtract from that. And it's going to trim the top and the bottom. And then we're going to take that and extend that up and down. And then I'm getting a little lost. We're going to go here. We're going to take the result of this extend grayscale into the foreground and subtract it from this to give us our squares, so you know what's coming already. Flood fill gradient, and 130, or actually we're using 45 degrees here. Just take note of that. Into a scan, into a mirror, into a add linear dodge, and we're going to take this extended grayscale into this multiply, and we're going to multiply this with it. And again, it's just to trim the sides off, I think. And then we're going to take the result of that and subtract with this extended shape over here. And then we're going to trim off the sides there, and then add it with this to get this. And then we're going to mirror it. I guess the mirror could have been up here, but for some reason I put it there. So then we have this, and then we move it down to the bottom. Transform 2D into a scan, again, because when I move things around, that always gets a little grayscale-y. So again, I just bring it back with the scan, or by changing this to nearest. Should probably start doing. Or using safe transform. Safe transforms don't have that issue, I think, for the most part. So the ones I scanned it, I have to move it again. Or did I already show this? But just in case, there it is again. Then I take both of those two transform 2Ds and I add linear dodge that bad boy. And then I histogram scan it. Again, to get rid of those things. Yep. And then I mirror it to the right. And then I take this, that goes into a blend. And then we take this mask paneling shape over here that we've made before. Up here between H19. Actually, no, we didn't. No, we don't have this yet. Okay, so let's go back to just after H18. I think we stopped here. Take this paneling shape original, and then we're going to move it down. Then we're going to do this histogram scan into this paneling shape. So let's take a pause there and go back over here. Actually, no, I think we... Did we finish this? Okay, well, whatever. We should finish 19 first. Sorry about that. Take this mask paneling shape. Maybe I did do it already. Whatever. Take this transform 2D. Now this transforms 2D match these same ones over here because they got to match up perfectly. So those two match the top and the bottom. And then we add them. Now, did I show this one? And this one. And then we histogram scan it to get rid of the uglies. Then we do a mirror grayscale. And then this gives us our mask paneling S. Again, for solid, because it's not hollowed out. And then we bevel that. And then we curve that bad boy. I think this is another copy paste, but just in case. Boom, boom, bing, bang, bong, bing, bang. Oops, bang, bang, and bang. Then from there, we histogram range and we histogram scan into a multiply, and then we have our mask paneling E for empty. And then that's going to fit into H19, set to max lighten, and that gives us these guys. Now that we have this paneling E here, we're going to go back over here, and then we have our paneling shape. We beveled, and I think I already want. I think, yeah, this is a copy paste of this. I think, yeah. Then we scan it. Then we take our, yeah, I think this is where we left off. So then we take, now that we have that will feed into here to subtract that from that. And then we extend that. So then we take that, and I think we trim. Yeah, so there was like a little bit to trim off there. So we go from this to this. And these pixels are important. And I think some of these get lost and stuff because of these silly little transform giving us these uggos. But anyways. So then we have this. So now you can kind of tell what's happening here. Now we have our X. So we have our mask paneling crown X01. And then we take our mask paneling E, which is this guy. And then we subtract these guys from this. And then what does that leave us with? Good job. It leaves us with Y. So then we have our mask paneling crown Y01. So now we have these two. And again, these are going to be used later on for coloring. So now I think we can go to 20. Is there anything below it? Oh goodness, did we do this? I don't think we... Oh crap. I think I must have glossed over this part here. Or did I even do this? None of this looks familiar. I think I just completely skipped 18. Or I think maybe I stopped here. Alright, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay. I knew this was gonna be an issue. Goodness. Okay. Okay, hold on. Okay, we just did these two. I don't think we did these. But in order to do this, we need this guy. And I think we do have this guy. Okay. So we should have this guy, crown middle S01. Just in case we don't. Sorry about that. It's just a shape, and then that gives us this guy. So now that we have this, we are going to go down here, and we're going to invert it. Going to invert that, and then we're going to add together this. Oh goodness. Okay. Okay. I need to stop doing that. I need to finish across, and then we go down. So let's go back up here. Take our crown middle S01, bevel it, copy paste this curve, and that bottom left one is 0, 0. If I already did this, I'm gonna feel silly. This is too long. Okay, so we have our histogram range, scan, multiply. We have this transform 2D here. I think I already did do this. But yeah, I think I did. Okay, just in case though. Just going to go over it one more time. Okay, so then this part is probably where I should have stopped. Okay, so then we need this guy. Okay, so yeah, so now let's go down here. So now we should have this crown middle E. We're going to add linear dodge it. Then we're going to invert it again to give us this. We're going to extend this shape all the way left to right, and then up and down. Then we're going to take this crown middle S01, which is this guy, and then we're going to subtract to kind of give us a cutout. And then we are going to subtract this extended shape, and it's going to give us the isolated corners, flit fill, gradient 45, scan, mirror grayscale. I think I already did this, whatever. And then add linear dodge. And then we're going to take this extended grayscale that we just made, and that's going to be used for the opacity here. And then from this result, we're going to invert it again. And then we're going to take that crown middle S01 for the foreground. And then we're going to subtract this invert from that to give us these guys. Yeah, because this setup right here looks different. So then we're going to take this guy and move it to the top, and then do another version where we move it to the bottom, and then we add them together, and that gives us our crown middle Y. And then we're going to do the same thing over here where we take this guy, we move it up there, and then we move it to the bottom, and then we add them together. And then we have our crown middle X. Then we take our flit fillies and we do random grayscales. Then we add them together, again, to have different variations. Then we histogram range it, and we scan down here, and we multiply them together, and then that gives us our mask crown middle. I don't even know. HV. High value node. And then that gets used over here, which I think I forgot to mention because I didn't have it done yet. So then after we do this add linear dodge, we do a min darken of 0.025, and we take our crown middle HV. And because we're doing a min darken, it's a takeaway mode, but it uses black to take away. So I invert it because obviously we're using white here. So I invert it 0.025. And then that feeds into input number 2 and input 1 and 3. We'll take a black mask, and then that gives us this. Now, it is important to always, if you're trying to get the corner utility thing going, right, where we do this, make sure you do this once before you move it into place. That's why my two transforms are after. Because if you start doing 2D transforms and then you try to do this, it's going to be hard to mirror. Because if it's up here and you're trying to mirror perfectly, it's going to mirror it down here. And you always want to mirror them together, then move it up there. And then now you have everything in place up here to mirror it down here. So just keep that in mind. And I'm sure you'll figure that out on your own because you'll run into a wall there. Okay, where did we leave off? Did we do this stuff over here? Yes, we did. Okay. So then we did 19. Oh, yeah, because I think we got here and then we're like, oh, we don't have this. Okay, so I think we did do this right here, right? Oh, goodness, I don't want to have to do it again. No, we did do it. If I didn't do this, yell at me in the comments and I will redo this entire video. But actually, okay, you know what? Just to be safe, just because I care about you guys, okay? Oh, no, wait, okay, so maybe I stopped here. Okay, but just in case. We scan it. We have our paneling shape. We have a transform 2D, put them over there. Then we scan it. Then we mirror. Yeah, I think we did do this already, just in case. And then that mixes our paneling S. Then we bevel them. Then we curve them. Boom, bang. Probably done this for like the 5th time now. Not a good look. Sorry, but guys, this is a very large. It was hard to organize. Range and scan. That gives us our paneling E. Which ended up, yeah, so we do have this already. Okay, whatever. Multiply, plug into 19. Now, I think this is the last big boy. We're almost done. We're almost there. Now we have H20. What is this? So I can tell that this is only for wall only. Because I see this only feeding into one. And right now we're not on wall. We are on window. So let's go to wall. And then see what happens if we turn this off. Yeah. Okay. So let's do that. Take our shape. Call that shape paneling shape O, original O2. We bevel it. Okay, now this is definitely a copy paste. So I'm not going to show you that. You can copy paste it. We have our histogram range, histogram scan. Multiply. The scan of that becomes paneling empty 1. Then we take this and we move it into place. Then that goes all the way over here into background and multiply by 0.025. Now all of this right here is just to give this guy some variations. If you look over here, some very, very subtle variation. But you know what? It's all about the detail, guys. This is what makes a good material. It's all in the details. Say it with me. It's all in the details. Not in the hips, in the details. So, we are going to start with this guy, which is this guy over here. That's going to fit into a blend, subtract. And then we're going to take our mask paneling empty 1. Invert it, multiply it by this guy, extend up and down, take the up, subtract to get our corner boys, flood fill to gradient, minus 45, histogram scan it, halfway, mirror, mirror. Take a pause there. Let's go over here. Now we are going to take these two right here, and we're going to subtract to give us this. We're going to take that and we're going to multiply with paneling shape original O2, which is just after 19. And then we're going to do this subtract blend up here. We're going to subtract our corner guys from mask paneling empty 1 to get this. Then here we are going to subtract this result by this guy to get rid of the sides. So then we get that. Then here we're going to take our corners and we're going to add them by this guy to get that. Then we have these guys. But before we get the result, we need to move them into place. So we're going to take this guy and this guy. We're going to move them. These should be the same transform, so just copy paste them. And then we're going to call this one paneling crown X02 because obviously it's these guys and these guys. And then we're going to take these two together and we're going to copy them by 0.75. Again, so I get a grayscale here. Then I edge detect. I could have just stopped there, but I wanted to have all four of these have different elevations. So I took them together, edge detected. And if these were all the same, if I were to just add these together, then it would just be this guy again. And if I edge detect this, it's going to count as one island. But by breaking that island up by different gray values, so this is like, I don't know, let's say 0.25 and this is 0.75. That's enough to use the edge detect, and it gives me 4 separate islands. So you see you have boom, 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 boom. So then we take that, and technically I don't need to do this. I could have done this later on, but it doesn't matter. We actually I should have done it later on because then I end up doing it again. Whatever. We multiply out the outside noise. And then we plug that into Stan Brown's floor fill get outputs. And then we take the second output there, random grayscale, multiply with the mask paneling empty 1, which is this mask. And then it gives us this, where they're touching again, the distance. Then we take our transform 2D and we move it into place. And then we auto level to get the full range back. I can use a range node instead. But then I multiply that. And then if I increase the multiply opacity on this, then you will see when this middle guy here, the difference is a lot. Oh, that's a little too much. Let's go like, I don't know, like here. Obviously, no one, not even a human could mess this up this badly, right? So that's why it's very, very subtle. Could probably go with like 0.04 or something just to kind of make it more visible. But we'll go with 0.025. And then that is only for wall. So that's going to go into input 1. And then input 2 and 3 are going to use a black mask. All right, I need another drink. Okay, we're back. We should have left off here, which is H21. Let's turn this on. What is this doing? What is this? Oh, I completely forgot about this. Okay, so this is the wallpaper. Okay, so we're done with the wall stuff, I guess. Okay, so let's see what, before we move on to that, let's see what all of them look like. So yeah, you can see right there is that, but let's turn that off for now. All right, so let's just go through these real quick. I think at this point I've just accepted this is going to be a long video. All right, so then this is what our window should look like. Very nice. And then our door. Very nice. Now let's go back to window. So like window, I think has the most detail. Now let's turn on H21. So basically, yeah, H21 is just the wallpaper bumpiness. So let's see. Okay. Let's start over here, obviously. So we're going to do crown ceiling and mask paneling. So these two masks, we're going to add them together to get this combination. And then we're going to invert it to get this combination. What I'm trying to do here is isolate the wall from all the wood, right? So, you know, this, let me get my snipping tool. So I'm trying to isolate, I'm trying to get rid of this stuff. And we're trying to just make a mask where it's just blue. And obviously if we switched over to wall, then it would just be, it would be all of this. But, you know, obviously with window, we need window out of the way. So that gives us this. And then here we need to subtract out our wall, window, door, obviously. Then we're left with that. And then we have to subtract off our paneling top. And then we are going to, what is this? Height trim top. Is this something we've made already? I don't remember this. What's this? Okay, yes, we have this. Okay. So yeah, so then we scan that because it's a height mask. It's not really a black and white mask. So then we take that and then we subtract to get rid of that right there. Boom. And then we subtract again our window sides. So then we go from this to this. And that, I think, gives us the profile of this. You can see here. And that's, so that's that. And then here we take this result here. And then we use this mask because this is the door frame. So this is already done. So then that is going to go into input 1 and 3 for wall and door. And then for window, it's going to be this guy. And then we're going to call this wall because now this is giving us just what's the wall. So discounting anything wood or window or anything like that. So it's just this. So we're going to call that wall. And then we're going to multiply our wallpaper trim, which I think we cannot do yet. Oof. Okay, hold on. Back up. This should not be here then. This should be... Oof. Oofers. Oofers, oofers, oofers. Huh. We can't do this till we do roughness. That's kind of cringe. Okay. What we're going to do... I don't like that. We are actually going to... I don't know what this is doing here. We are going to move this over here. Like this. And we are going to clean this up a bit. Hold on. We got this. This can be fixed. Sorry for having to do it live or see you guys how the sausage is made. Okay. We're chilling. Okay. So actually we don't have this yet. Okay, so we're gonna stop here at wall and we are going to go over here. Now, this pattern I made in a separate graph. Whoops. No, I just want to, whatever. So let's load that up. Be right back. Okay, so we have one quick thing to do over here. We're just going to get right into it. We're going to start with this shape. And if you don't want to have that pattern on the wall, then you can just skip this part or fast forward. We take a bevel here. We rotate it 90 degrees. And then we do a swirled grayscale, which basically just swirls wherever this is. So I'm going to undo that. Actually, I didn't end up using this one. That's why it's off to the side, not plugged in. So we're going to use this one. So look at the values here and the amount and stuff. I don't think I ever cleaned this up to make it nice numbers, but it's okay. Take that swirl, and then we're going to mirror it to create this kind of cool sword shape. And then we're going to move it off to the left a little bit, because then we're going to mirror it again to create this. And then I move it, or I rotate it 90 degrees. And then I take both of those and then I max lighten to get this shape. To get these fancy shapes, it's just a bunch of mirroring. You make some weird shapes and you mirror it, and then you get some nice stuff. So then here I just made it larger. I scaled it up. And then I do a transform 2D here to rotate it 45 degrees, I believe. And maybe make it a little smaller. And then I max lighten both of these to kind of give it like the corner pieces here. So we go from that to that. So yeah, so I rotated it 45 degrees and made it smaller. And then I do a histogram scan to get us a true mask of that. And I call it mask symbol 01. And then this guy into a full scan, it gives us max symbol 02. So then we have these two to play with. So then I take max symbol 02, and then I rotate it 45 degrees and change the size. And then I take this transform 2D again and I scale it down. And then I add those two together to get this shape. Then I take mask symbol 2 and I subtract. I subtract this from this to get this. And then I make it bigger. And then I add this like palm tree looking things to the snowflake. And we get a palm tree snowflake looking thing. And then this is optional, I called it, because I think you can turn this on and off to get different shapes. So play around with that. We have mask symbol 02. I think I make it smaller here to subtract with this to get this inner shape here. But it was on, so we're going to stick with it. Then we do a subtract here where we take max symbol 2 again and I transform 2D 45 degree rotation with some slight scale change to hollow out the inside. And then we just make a circle here. We call it circle 1. Why did I rotate it 45? Why did I rotate a circle? Whatever. I think what I really just wanted to do was scale it down. And then that becomes the centerpiece there. And then that goes into an add linear dodge. And then take this result over here from the mask symbol 2. Plug that into this transform 2D. Make it smaller again. And then make this one even smaller and rotate it. And then you get a tiny snowflake. Then you rotate it again because why not? Then you add them together to get that. And then I hollowed out that inner circle that we made. So I take circle 01 and I make it smaller. And then I subtract it. And then I take the overall shape and I make it smaller. And by the way, feel free to use your own pattern if you want. So this is just if you want to follow my pattern. Okay, so now I need these guys. Okay, so yeah. So then we take mask. Okay, we don't have this guy yet. So let's go down here first. Take this shape and take mask symbol 01 and we're going to subtract this shape. We're going to use this transform 2D over here. So I just move the shape up here and then make sure it's set to no tiling. Otherwise it'll spawn over here. Like that, you don't want that. So then we cut a hole up here. And then this guy is going to go into this transform 2D and it's just going to be moved off to the left to create this like lip here. So it goes and then it goes over. And it's all coming from the same shape. And then we subtract again. Wait, what am I doing here? Do I even need this? Oh, I think I just take another one and I kind of smooth this little point there. So this transform 2D and then just gets moved into place, subtract. And then I mirror the left to the right to get rid of, obviously, to make those changes over to the right side. I take this shape here and I move it top left. And then I call that quarter. And then I mirror it to create a half. And then I take the half and I multiply this by that. And it gives me this side trim here. And then I transform to D and move it down low. Then I mirror it to the top. And then I rotate it 90 degrees. And then I add them together to get that. And then I shrink it down a little bit to kind of pull them off of the wall, off the edges. And we'll come back to that in just a second. So now let's go over here. We take our mask quarter and our mask symbol 1. And I use the quarter mask to kind of give me this top left quadrant. And then I move it off to the bottom right to kind of have it fit snugly down there. and I make it twice as small, and then I mirror it to the left, and that's in the left corner, and then I go top right, mirror it to the top, and then I add that linear dodge, and then I make it all smaller a little bit, and then here I add this guy that we just made, and I add them together to create this. I don't think I ended up using this one, but just in case you want to. And then here I have a switch for side trim. So this is what it currently looks like. And then if you turn this, I guess you could just go over here and play around. So turn off side trim, and then you get that design. And then, oh yeah, I forgot that I added like different patterns or different ones. So then we have that. And that's another switch grayscale. So I added 3 parameters for these switch grayscales: accent 01, accent 02, and side trim. So then in here I made a shape, basic shape. And then here I made the shape a little bit smaller. You can see there with the transform 2D. Then I multiplied it. And then I took this initial shape here and I made another even smaller one. I don't know why I did it this way, but I basically, what I wanted to do was, I was like 3 in the morning when I did this, and I wanted to just create a frame, basically, is what I'm doing here. Then I used that to add to this. So I take that and I add it with that. And then I do input, I put a tile sampler, and I do 2 pattern inputs, and I change the pattern to pattern input, and I do 4x4. And then I plug the same thing into both, because I was playing around with different combinations and like offsetting and stuff like that, like, you know, stuff like this, but it didn't really look that good. I should just leave this at 0, I guess. Okay, so let me just show you the settings here. 4x4, pattern input 2, pattern number, nearest, size normal 1100, 0.925. No scale random, because obviously I want these to be exactly the same. Everything else here is the same. Bing, bang, boom. Yep, nothing else sticks out. Then again, I just do a quick histogram scan, just because there are some uglies in here, some grayscales. So I want to tighten them up. Get a true mask. Then I take my safe transform grayscale and I rotate it, and then I get a bunch of uglies, which I think I was okay with, because I did want it to have some sort of like smooth fall off. But I think I ended up fixing it later. Yeah. So then the safe transform 2D into an add linear dodge, and I make these just this little like 45-degree rotated squares. So I just make a shape, I tile it 4 times, square, 0.05 scale, and then I think I changed this to rotate 45 degrees. Add it to that to get these in between cubes. And then I take that result into true, and then this result into false, and then we call this one accent 01. Oh yeah, I leveled it up there. Then here we take this shape, we tile it 4 times, change the scale, and then we increase the size. So it's basically this diamond, except it's stretched on one of the side axes. And then we come up with this, rotate it 45 degrees, and then we offset it a little bit. And then we offset this one the same, but on the opposite direction. And then we add them together, and we get this. There's probably millions of ways to do this, and I probably did it the hardest way, but here we are. And then we add it to create this secondary effect. And then we make another switch grayscale and call this one accent 2. And then we histogram the whole shebang. Get rid of those uggos. And then we call it pattern. We create an output. So do output. And then we called it pattern 01. And then we labeled it pattern 01. And then I don't care for any of these things. I should probably delete all this, but I kept it so that I could visualize the pattern here. Otherwise, I don't have anything. I don't have like a height or a normal or anything like that. So don't worry about any of this. You just want to plug this into pattern, into this new output that we made. And now let's go back to wall, window, and door. I'm going to pause here. All right, we're back, but I have to fix, every time you switch like graphs, you have to reset your this stuff here. I think we did a 7.5 for the height scale. We did a tessellation of 6. Oops. Okay. Where did we leave off? Okay, so then you're able to drag this guy in here, just like you would with the Stan Brown utility node. You can just drag it from the folder when you download it and just drag it into your graph. If I had deleted all those other outputs, then I would only have one output, which is ideal, but I didn't yet. So I have this, it's all the way at the bottom, pattern 01, that output that we just made. And I don't need this one anymore. That was from a long time ago. And then we're going to take pattern 01 and plug it into this safe transform grayscale. Why? Because I am scaling, or I'm tiling it twice. So changing that to 2, and I'm offsetting it a little bit because I want the, oops, let me undo that. Because I want the wallpaper to kind of be at the same spot in the bottom as in the top. It's not perfect, but it's close enough. Then from after the safe transform, we do a flood filly into a flood filly random color, which we'll be using later on. And then we're going to call that FF for flood fill pattern color, because it belongs to the pattern and it's a random color. Actually, it should be called random color. There we go. And then from the safe transform, we're going to call that mask pattern 01. Now, before we go up there, let's go back down here. So now this is going to be the fabric of the wallpaper. Now, a detail as fine as this, I don't actually add to the height information. I'm only going to add this to the normal. So actually, let's save this for the normal. That's the next part. Yeah, because we use it over here. Okay, that's spoilers. Okay, so now that we have this, let's go back over here. I think we stopped over here at mask wall. So now we're going to create this blend mode set to multiply. And we're going to take our pattern 01 that we just made and our wall mask right here. And then we're going to multiply them together, because I want to cut out the wall mask from all of this. So then we're left with that. We multiply to get rid of more if needed. Actually, do I need this here anymore? I don't think I need this, but I'm afraid to break something, so I'm just going to leave it. So I think I'm just doing this again, which is redundant, but I think it's just because we ended up fixing it from over here or wherever it was. But we're going to stick to the plan. So now I added a new switch grayscale here, and I call this wallpaper. So if I go over here and I go to parameters, yeah, I called it wallpaper question mark. And this is just so that I have a switch for if I want wallpaper or not, like solid color or not solid color. So if I go here and I turn off wallpaper, it's going to go away. So after this blend, I'm going to use a levels here of 0.00125, because I want this to be very, 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 very subtle and not have it pop out so hard as if I were to turn this off, because then you get that, and we don't want that. Do a switch grayscale, take your mask black mask, plug that into false. So if you don't want wallpaper, if you turn it off, then you have nothing. Switch grayscale, feed that into the foreground, add linear dodge. And then the last bit, do I want to do this now or not? Let me think. 1 second. Okay, I think I'm going to just throw this in here because why not? Some extra flavor. If you don't care about the door opening and closing, then don't worry about this part, but I do want to I don't want to leave anything out because I do plan on selling this material, like the entire graph, for anybody who just wants to like go in by themselves and look at it. But I don't want it to seem like I'm only showing certain things if you buy it, because that's not the case. So let's get into this. Now, there is some math here, which I don't really fully understand so much yet, but I'm starting to get into it. So I was a little hesitant, but you know what? I'm just going to show you guys. It's not that hard. Okay, so I'm going to switch this back to door. I'm just going to explain to you what's going to happen. So I do have a switch called open door and a slider called door opening amount. And if you change this door opening amount, the door will open. But it only opens if you have the open door thing turned on. So if I turn this on, then you'll see the door switch. Now, the difficult thing to me was having the door open in a specific way. What I wanted to do was like a swinging door. When you open, there's two phases to this slider. There's from 0 to 0.5 and from 0.5 to 1. So from 0 to 0.5, the door is going to open. So you can see the right side is lowering. And then once we go over 0.5, the left side is going to start lowering. And that is what gives it the full effect of the door opening. Now, to do that, you do need some math, because you're kind of breaking up the slider into two phases. The beginning, the 0.5, and then once you go past 0.5, then the left side goes down, right? Like, how do you do that with a levels node? How do you do that? And that's what it took me like 2 hours to figure out. It was so simple. Okay, so after H21, we are going to create another portal called final height. Now, past final height, we're going to have H22, and we're going to call it multiply. Now let's go over here. We're going to take our mask opacity, which is this guy, and we're going to invert it, and that's going to give us the mask for just what's inside the door frames. So this thin guy here. And then we are going to create a multiply blend. This doesn't matter. And then we're going to take this gradient linear 1, and we are going to transform to D it. And what I did is I shrinked it to match the bounds of the door. So this was manual, so I just shrunk it on the x-axis, and then I multiplied it, because I don't want it to stretch from here to here. I want it to stretch. There's probably a better way to do this, but this was like 3 in the morning. Okay, so then we take our multiply blend here, and then we do an auto levels to get the full range, which I think there is a difference, but it's just very hard to see because it's very subtle. From this auto level, we're going to do a histogram scan. And this is where the magic happens. So this is basically the timeline. This is that slider. And we're going to promote that position to a parameter, and we're going to call it door opening. So if I double click, go here, and we're going to call it door opening amount. And then we have our identifier, door opening amount. And then it's going to be a float. I think it's the default float. And it's going to be a slider. And then the minimum is going to be 0. The default is going to be 0. And the maximum is going to be 1. Okay, and then we're going to clamp is true. So now, let's go back to preview. So now we are going to take our door. So we're going to call the result of that door timeline. If you're familiar with like Unreal Engine, there's timelines. So then we have this specific thing. So now I'm going to make another scan just to show you what it looks like. So then if I were to take this position, you can see what's happening there. We're opening and closing the gradient. So that's what that door opening thing is. Okay. Once we have that, we're going to go up here and we're going to invert it. So we're going to take this and we're going to invert it, because we're going to be using multiply, which means we need black information to reduce from the white. So I invert it. And then I need a levels. Now, the first thing you'll notice with this levels is that the pointers here are red, which is odd because we've never had these in my tutorials before. But you probably know if you know what's going to happen next. So that means that what I did is if I go to values, it means that the level out low and the level out high are tied. So I do this drop down again and I do door opening. They are tied to this guy, to this slider. So whenever this slider gets moved, then these two pointers or sliders also get moved. So then this is where the math starts. So I think the first one I did was the level out high. So do the drop down, do door opening, and then once you do that, so let's just do it with this guy. You click this blue icon with the board and the pencil, and it's going to take you to this. So actually, I'm going to go back, and I'm going to undo the level animate because I don't need that changed. So once you promote these guys and tie them to that slider, we're going to go with the level out high, and we're going to click this guy. And actually, let's go with this guy first. Yeah, so we're going to go with the top, the level out low first. Now, just to keep it really simple, because even I am going to struggle with this. This door opening, this is the slider right now. And the door slider by default starts at 0, right? But if that slider is set to 0.5, then this value changes to 0.5. So think of it that way. So if this is 0.5, then 0.5 times 2 is what class? It's 1. So what that means is that when this is 0.5, it's going to actually be, it's going to be 1. So let's do this. So when this is, when this is 0.5, then it's going to be 1 over here. And then when you do a 1 minus, it just inverts it. So what's the inverse of 1? Negative 1. And then that means that the final result right here is going to be minus 1. So whenever the slider is at 0.5, then this value here, the level out low, is going to be at minus 1. So what happens when this is actually 0.25? Then that means that this is going to be at 0.5. So this is going to be negative 0.5, which is going to equal negative 0.5. What happens if this is at 0.1? Then that means that this is going to be at 0.2. And you get the point. It's tied to this. So it'll do all these, this multiplication and this inverse to whatever this value is. So whenever the slider changes, it's going to do all these things and it's going to update. So that's what's happening here. Whatever the slider is at, it's going to multiply by 2 and then invert it. And then that's going to become the value. So now let's do that. Let's edit the math for the level out high. So the good way for me to visualize was to add numbers to it. So when this is at 0.5, what a lerp does, and listen, I'm not very good with this, okay? So this is like my non-mathematician interpretation. Basically, there is like a maximum and a minimum, right? So the minimum here is 0 and the maximum is 2. So when this value is at 0.5, then what is 0.5 of 2? It's 1. Because it's telling you what's the middle point between 2 and 0. It's 1. Now this is like 0.25. What is the quarter way between 0 and 2? I don't know. I'll leave that math to you guys. Let's stop while I'm ahead. You get the idea. So then by doing this, it enables me to, you know what? Before I get something wrong, I'm just going to hover over it and it tells you what a linear interpolation does. Okay. There's your answer. Okay. I'm going to quit while I'm ahead. Now, one thing I did forget to mention is when you have your, you know, your final operation, right click it and choose set as output node, and it'll turn orange, I think. So I think I didn't mention that for the first one. So let's go back over here. Yeah. And one other thing I forgot to mention. Sorry, it's been a while since I've touched this. We don't need this. I don't know what that is. But yeah, so right click, set as output node. This is what you need for the top one. For this guy here, for level out low, this is what it should look like. And then for level out high, it should look like this. And just right click and make sure you set to output node. Okay, hopefully that wasn't too painful for some of you that do understand what's happening. And then for opacity, we're going to take our mask opacity and invert it. And then make that so that all of this stuff only happens within the door frame. So now, if done correctly, you should be able to open your door. And we'll have to revisit some of this, not too much of it, but just like, make sure this works for, your normal and the color so that it darkens when you open it and stuff like that. So then this result from the H22 is going to go into the new boolean called open door. Now you can have this or not have it, because if you don't have it, it doesn't really matter, because if you have set to window, then it's not going to happen because we have this multi-switch grayscale here afterwards anyways. But just as an extra safety, because I wanted to be able to turn it on and off so that I don't have to keep changing the slider back to 0 to turn it off. That way I just had a switch. So after the H22, a switch grayscale, I'm going to put final height in there. I don't know why I didn't do this. Oh, I know why, because it wasn't letting me. So then this guy goes into false. And then we have our multi-switch grayscale, our wall window door. And since this is only for door, then this just goes into the third slot into the input. And then final height again for 1 and 2. And then into our basic level that doesn't do anything. It's just a default level as a placeholder for me. And then we're going to plug that final height into our height to normal world units from before and our RTAO. And just plug those in, which we should have plugged in already. And I think that is the end of height. This is for metallic for the wallpaper. Yeah, so this was a long one. A lot of information here. And next one is going to be normal. Now this stuff here is just very repetitive, but it's very easy. We'll be taking that base wood material that came out before this tutorial. And we have 3 outputs there. We have the normal, the base color, and the roughness. And I do some simple changes here afterwards. But then, we just have to map it to, our masks. Like all those masks we've been creating have been for this. So all those like X and Y that we made are going to be used here. And we'll cover that more in the next tutorial. Well, the next, because the next one's going to be just the normal line up here. Or actually, I might do yeah, I'm going to do color and normal together, actually. And then roughness will be its own. Roughness and metallic will be its own with opacity and whatnot. But hopefully I didn't mess anything up. If I did, let me know in... Wait, did we do this? I don't think we did this. Okay, hold up. We got one last thing to cover. Let's go back to H09. And we are going to build this. This is the last thing, I think. Oh, wait, no, we have this guy too. Holy, this is a long one. Okay, let's do it. Again, this is just adding minor detail to the... So if you look over here, at the door. We're just adding this seam detail here. So let's turn this back on. Or let's turn it off for now. And let's do that real quick. Okay, super speed mode. So we need to take these two shapes, and it's going to be the same. So top goes with top, bottom goes with bottom. Let's start with the top one here. We have this extend shape grayscale into this safe transform grayscale. And then we take this shape here and we subtract this from that to have this. Then we do a subtract from here. We subtract this guy here, this extended shape. And then we take this shape and we have the subtract blend over here. But to do that, we need to get this mirror grayscale. And then we scan it to get rid of the height information to create a mask. Then we extend it top to bottom. And then we subtract that from this shape. I could just invert it, I guess. I don't know why I didn't just invert it. But anyways. Then we multiply with the mask wall window door. Mask wall window door. So we should have just done this. I don't know why I didn't just do that. So then we'll have these two portals here. And then after this guy, this subtract, we multiply with the WWD. And then we subtract door frame from it. Because we want to just get this, we want to get these long boys here. This guy, and this guy. And then we're going to call that mask door planks Y. And then we're going to subtract from door planks X. But first we need to go over here, take this subtraction blend and multiply by WWD. And then we subtract door frame. And then we get our door planks X and our door planks Y. Subtract the X from the Y to get this. And then we copy, X from Y at 0.75 just to get color different grayscale values. Then we edge detect it. And again, because these islands are not touching, that treats them as each individually as the different one because they're not the same grayscale value. Edge detect, flood fill to random grayscale, and then we distance it. I should have done the Stan Brown utility note, but I don't know why I didn't for this case. So then we take edge detect. And then that becomes the mask input there. Then we take our histogram range. And then we do an add linear dodge. And for that, we take our WWD. We invert it. Then we add our door frame. Then we add a door detail, which is this guy after the auto levels in H9, before H9. No, that is H9, I guess. And we scan it. Then we add it to this so that we have this. Then we add linear dodge with this result. And then we call this height door planks. And then this gets used all the way over here where we have the two levels at H8. And then we can turn it on and do a multiply of 0.05. And that gives us this detail here. Well, it's more noticeable in other areas. Like you can see it right there as well. And then the other thing we forgot to do is this We'll save this for the next one. It's not that bad. We're going to take our mask paneling shape, which is this guy. And I did this really early on, so I don't think I knew there was an extend shape. I didn't know this node existed yet. We're just going to extend it all the way up to 2 just in case and replace that. So then we do our histogram scan to make sure there aren't any like grayscales, which I think when I use the 2D transform there are, but I don't need it with the extend shape grayscale, but just in case. And then from here, we are going to go into this subtract blend here. And we're going to take our WWD mask and do a transform 2D. And again, this is another extend shape, but we extend it in the 90-degree direction. Like that. And then we're going to subtract that from this. And we're going to get left with this. And then from here, we're going to go into the subtract. Take this mask paneling portal and subtract the mask paneling. So then we're left with this. And then we take, what is this? Okay, this is used later on, so let's just do it right now. So then after this guy, we take the mask crown floor 01 and we subtract that from this guy, and then we're left with this. And then from this blend here, we're going to pull off into an invert grayscale and multiply with our mask paneling to get this. And then we're going to call this mask back paneling, and we'll use that later on. Then after we have this subtract blend here, we're going to do this other subtract, and we're just going to subtract a bunch of stuff. So now we're going to subtract crown paneling, then we're going to subtract our WWD, and then we're going to subtract our crown middle S01, and then the result of that is going to go into this copy set to 0.75, and then we're going to take the result from this guy, and then we're going to subtract it from our mask paneling to get this. And then we're going to take this extended shape grayscale from down here and subtract it from this guy to get this. And then we subtract our paneling S to get that. And then we subtract our crown floor to get that. And then we subtract our crown paneling to get this. Once we have this and this, because right now what I'm trying to do is just line up our crown, our boards like this. I want to isolate these guys. I want to isolate the red from the blue basically, because I want my wood grain to run in those directions. But also that's where I want the seams, right? So like that would have a seam here, a seam there, a seam there, a seam there. And then I wouldn't want a board to go this long, so I would have a seam in the middle, maybe one up here, maybe not, because I think having one like going this way would be nice. But yeah, that's what I'm trying to do right now. So then once I have, these and these, you can see that these are the planks, right? So then I copy them at a 0.75, and then here I subtract this tiny shape, very thin tiny shape, and then I move it to the bottom. Probably change it to nearest. Oh wait, no, I did the histogram scan, so I'm gonna undo that. Do the histogram scan to get to get rid of those grayscales, and then I subtract because I wanted to add a seam in the middle. Now I think this changes based on what I'm working on. So if I go back to window, then it makes sense why I have it there. Now once it's there, I take this, I make a shape. I don't know why I have it like that. I take a shape and I make it 0.999, and I think I did this trick in another tutorial where basically it's 1 pixel off the wall. So then I am able to create a pixel around all of this. Well, I mask it so that it only applies to this. So we take this result here, this histogram scan, and we invert it. And then I tell that to only occur where the white is. So that border thing is only happening here, because that's where I want the seam to be. I don't want the seam to be in these guys, because this is all supposed to be like one plank. So then I subtract again with, I don't know why this guy's down there, with crown middle S 02, and then I cut out a hole to separate these planks. And then I have my wall, window, door, multi-switch grayscale here. And this only applies to input number 2, 1, and 3. We'll have this guy. And then we do the edge to tank shebang. And then we use Dan Brown's flood fill here. And then you can see here that it's breaking up all the planks for me now. Right? So this is 1, 2, 3. So this is what I wanted, right? So you can see right here, the plank cut in the middle. Very nice. And then this gives me my FF random color. And we'll use this later on in color. So then I take an auto levels and I pull from the random grayscale. And then I have a histogram range here turned off. And I was just playing with the elevation. Technically, I guess you don't need this if I have it turned off. You can just delete that, not worry about that. And then here I take my mask crown floor 01 and I subtract. What is this? Okay. So I subtract the bottom here. And then I subtract again the, what's this? The crown paneling. And then I subtract the paneling S. Subtract those guys. And then I subtract the middle, because that's where the window is going to be. And then I subtract the paneling. Oh, no, I multiply. Sorry, multiply. To get rid of anything up here. Like all this stuff over here. I multiply to get rid of it. And then I subtract crown middle SO2. These two guys. To get rid of it from there. Because it's still there. And then here are my planks. And then this becomes input 2 for window. And then for anything not window, aka this guy, it becomes 1 and 3. Then this plugs into here, which will give us our seams here, here, and everywhere else. So then you turn this on, off, it's gone, on, it's back. So then you kind of have like this more detail. And you can play around with how much it shows, obviously, with this. So like right here is a little too crazy, unless you want that result. But I wanted to be subtle. And then obviously you can play around with the what's the word I'm looking for? The gap between, I guess, these, if you want them all to kind of be closer together, and that way the gap is not too far apart, the values, I mean. But yeah, okay, I think that is it. Yeah, I think we did all this. Yeah, we did. I remember all that. Do we do this? I'm not sure if we did this. Oh goodness, did we do this? I don't know if we did this, guys. Oh, I really screwed this one up. No, okay, this one we did do. Alright, well, let's finish this up all the way then. Oh my god, it's gonna be like a 3-hour video. Okay. So we are going to take window inner frames and window small frames Y. We're going to subtract. And then we are going to scan it into a subtract by the window outer frame. And then we are going to multiply from mask wall window door, just like all the way over there. And then that's going to give us window small frames Y. And then we're going to take mask window inner frames and window small frames X and subtract, and then we're going to take window small frames Y and subtract that from this result to get that. Scan it. What's this? Subtract windows outer frame, and then multiply with WWD to get window small frames X. I don't know why this is over here and not over here. Oh, because that can only be done after that. And then this is done after these guys. Okay. And then that gives us this guy. All right. Oh, God, did we do this guy? Yeah, we did. I remember that one. Okay. Sweet. I mean, bittersweet. Sweet because we're done, but bitter because it was kind of all over the place there. Sorry about that. I knew that was going to be an issue. I wanted to get this out to you guys, and I didn't really map it out too well. Hopefully that wasn't too painful, and hopefully I didn't miss anything. If you have any questions, just let me know in the comments, and I'll try to answer you as soon as I can. Maybe I'll make some corrections in the next one if I need to, if you guys point something out. If you guys don't say anything, I'm going to assume it was perfect. In that case, you're welcome.